Welcome, everybody, to the 10th episode of the Nesting Eagles podcast. My name is Drew, and I'm here with Beth. How are you doing, Beth?
I'm doing great on this Earth Day.
Yeah, so happy Earth Day to everyone. And there has been a lot going on. So we're just going to dive right into it because there's a ton of stuff that we need to talk about. This was a very eventful week and a half since our
Yeah.
last pod. So let's start it out. So I'm going to throw it to you, Beth, for a little bit of context. This is Bella and Scout's nest in West Virginia, and I'll let you talk about what occurred.
Oh, well, we just had a unbelievable thunderstorm roll through our area just about an hour ago that made the house almost levitate. And when you get those really rough storms coming through, bad things can happen. And looking at Bella and Scout's tree, if it isn't partially dead, it's mostly dead, and there is a lot of weight in that nest. And so when you get really the heavy winds and rains that we've been getting, there's only so much torque a tree that's partially alive can take, or any tree can take. And those winds were really twisting this nest, and unfortunately, it came down in the dead of night in a bad thunderstorm, and we Bella flew was on the nest when it went down, and you could almost see Bella's concern for the weather
Yeah.
as it was going on. And the three eaglets, fortunately, were sleeping, and so it was over with pretty quickly for them, but they did not survive the fall of the whole nest coming down. Bella did fly off, and she has been seen, and she is fine. But a very rough go. It was very just really heartbreaking to lose these three because um, they were now thermal regulating. They didn't need to be brooded as much, and you could really see them and their activity around the nest. So um,
Yeah,
a
it's
sad
it's
day.
it's real unfortunate, and I know we had talked about this earlier, but this nest is about 22 years old, I think, Beth. Is that correct?
22 years old, and
Yeah.
that's pretty amazing in itself that it's
Yeah.
lasted that long.
And just the nature of eagle nests, a bald eagle nest, that they're constantly adding things. So this nest was um, very large, and I'll preface it with viewer discretion. You can see the video of when it collapsed. If you're squeamish, I wouldn't recommend it. But we watched it. I watched it a few times, and it's devastating. It really is. And our uh, our thoughts go out to everyone, that invested and watched this cam and for the entire season or multiple years. It's tough. But this is really what it is with nature. These storms are coming through, and that was some intense wind. And this is not this is around the country too as well. We see it in Wisconsin. I remember when I was out in Colorado, you can get those storms, and they can easily blow down a nest. And it's
Yeah.
an unfortunate incident.
And we had golf ball to tennis ball size hail. It smashed the windshields out of cars just barely to the north of where I live in southern Wisconsin. But if that hit a nest, if that hit an eaglet or an eagle, that that's hard for a mature eagle to take. But I haven't looking through our sheets of how our nests are doing, I haven't seen anything that's shown up that shows evidence that we lost a nest or we lost an eagle or that something is amiss. But it does take some time to flesh that out.
Yeah, and I know of just from social media and everything, a lot of people have been talking about how common this is. Is this a common occurrence? And from our perspective at the Bald Eagle Nest Watch, the Southern Wisconsin Southern Wisconsin bird
Southern Wisconsin birding
bird
bird
alliance. Yeah,
alliance.
it's a mouthful. I'm still working on it, but
We both tend to say the former Madison Audubon because it's
yeah,
just easier to
yes,
say.
a Bald Eagle Nest Watch. So it's very long name, but we have, we've lost some nests through the years, but it's not super common. I would say the vast majority of the nests that come down are in the off season, just because they're not being, maintained by the eagles at the time. So, and you get some storms, especially, early winter. There's some good wind in southern Wisconsin, and later on into the fall and stuff, there's some storms. And so I wouldn't say it's common to lose them, but I
Starting to
think,
become a little bit more common with more dramatic weather.
yeah, and it has, yeah, for sure. And I think probably Beth, I know you do this a little bit too, and as a coordinator, I've kind of some of the nests that I've taken over the years are quote unquote the bad luck, kind of the nests that have had some rough luck. So a lot of times I took those kind of nests and for whatever reason, it seems like those nests, kind of like this one with its checkered past, I guess, with um, cannibalizing your babies, but they seem to have troubles too. I know one of my long-term nests, fortunately, they've moved out, but they were right on the Wisconsin for a long time, and it seemed like every year there was one instance of they had lead poisoning because they were
Uh,
bringing fish that definitely had lead, and one of the babies died from lead. The other one was rescued and eventually was went to a rehabber and was re-released. But then a couple years later, their nest, similar to this instance, though the babies were a bit smaller than these ones. Just a freak April storm rolled through, and that nest came completely down, and they lost. I think it was two or three eaglets that were in the nest. It's devastating. It does happen, and as Beth mentioned, it's happening more. But
yeah, we've lost two nests out of our 37. They were brooding, so chicks had hatched and they came down in storms.
yeah,
And last year we had two nests come down, um, and one had already had a fledgling in it. The second eaglet hadn't fledged, but the nest coming down caused it to
yeah,
fledge, which was great because it was fine.
yeah,
And then the other nest, they weren't quite ready to fledge yet. So one went into rehab. The other one was tended to by the parents on the ground. We couldn't get to it,
yeah,
and it survived. So we were fortunate that they were far enough along. When they're this young, um, they're not going to survive the
yeah,
fall. And in reality, it it's it's very expensive and it's very hard to raise an eaglet to adulthood to fledging and release it without it becoming imprinted.
yeah,
And then you don't want that eagle to live a life where it's in care for the rest of its life because it doesn't know it's an eagle anymore.
yeah.
So it's kind of best in some ways if they're really young that it's over with quickly for them.
Yeah, and we've seen that. There's been a couple instances where nests have come down or the eaglets have fallen out of the nest before fledge. And I would say the vast majority of the time, even when we rescued them, they had to be put down. They had to be taken to to a rehabber and be mainly put down just because the injuries that they ordeal, just broken bones and
Yeah.
bruising and damaging. For instance, this one was up, I think they said is a 90 feet tall tree. It was up 90 feet. You can just imagine, the even with the wind. it would have damaged them if they had survived. Unfortunately, it's probably a good thing that they
Right.
didn't survive because they would have been in really rough shape. But
It's not the greatest life for an eaglet. And those decisions are not made by Drew or myself, or really the DNR. Those decisions are made by wildlife rehabbers. So they have veterinarians, they do x-rays, they look at them, they decide whether or not, what approach is the best approach and what is the best life for the eaglet. So those decisions do not reside in our hands. And sometimes it's great. Like Murphy, who we recently lost, had an eaglet about this size that he reared, taught how to be an eagle. And that's great. And those rehabbers then have to make that decision on, how they can go about most effectively keeping an eagle and raising it, so that it can go out into nature and be a wild bird.
yeah, and just a quick shout out to our rehabbers across the country and in Wisconsin. They do amazing work, and it's not an easy decision for them, but they do what's best for the eagle. And a lot of sometimes they can save it and rehab it and get it out back into the wild, and other times it makes more sense to be put down. So that those are tough decisions, and we highly respect what they're doing.
If you can imagine just how large this nest is and
Yeah,
all that debris coming down over these chicks,
yeah,
um, you just want it to be over with as quickly as possible
yeah,
for the chicks. And neither Drew nor I are particularly squeamish or we understand nature and that it's brutal. There's a 50% mortality rate on these birds from the moment they hatch through their first year of life. And that's for a reason because of things like this. And as Drew is always saying, it's weather related most of the time. But the nest coming down, watching the video, both Drew and I were discussing how that was really, it was hard to watch.
yeah,
So um, if we kind of found it hard to watch, I'm sure nobody else should really be watching it. And you don't see anything happen to the birds. It's just the
yeah,
violence of the nest going down with the wind was really
yeah.
pretty amazing.
Yeah, it was a tough watch, and as you said, we've seen a lot of things. We've done this for a while, so I've seen all kinds of things. It's not, but yeah, it is. At the end of the day, it is. These are wild birds, and it's nature. It can be rough. Nature can be really
Yeah.
rough. But as we said, it's fortunate that they didn't make it. Another question I saw a lot on social media is, what happens to the nest as it goes down? Beth and I have both, unfortunately, had to go to nest sites that came down, and um, I'm really surprised they said they found all three, and we were talking, Beth was commenting on that too, that they actually found all three of the bodies because the
And it
vast
was
majority,
quick.
yeah, it's surprising because it's like these nests fall apart, and it's just like a debris field. It doesn't look anything like a nest when you go
Yeah.
to these fallen nests. It's
You don't see any of the grass or the
no,
nest bowl. It looks like somebody blew up a tree.
yeah,
Um,
basically,
and
yeah,
it's fragmented. So as all these sticks come down, they shatter. Even if it's been raining, um, the sticks still the outer coating of them might be wet, but then they just shatter at that height when they hit the ground. So it's it doesn't you could certainly well, the first time I went to one, I'm like, is this a nest? Really? I don't see any parts of the
yeah,
nest. And
yeah,
you're walking over all these sticks, but it's like it's just so blown out where
yeah,
nothing resembles an actual nest, or it's not. And as Drew and I were discussing, like most songbirds or whatnot, they weave a bit of their nests, like or they mud them or they do something for them to hold together. Bald eagles don't do anything like that. Those sticks are just sticks laying on sticks laying on sticks. They may wiggle them around a little bit so they get um, maybe a little tighter gap between the stick that was laid before it, but it's not like there's mud or grass woven throughout it to hold its shape. So,
Yeah, all their structure is coming from, the branches of the tree where they build it. Without that support, it's not going to be there. And that's part of the reason with these huge nests that they do come down is, if one of the branches, the supporting branches breaks, or, a lot of times they use dead trees because it's open, they have a good view and they're tall. But it can be a kiss of death too because of the nature of a dead tree. A dead tree is going to come down. It dries out and comes down, and you have these enormous nests that are very heavy sitting in them. So that's just unfortunate, but that's the nature of a bald eagle nest. So
well, and as you know, Drew, the nest closest to me, which is like 2 miles as a crow flies from my house, kept building in the same dang dead tree.
yeah,
And the third time it fell, they decided maybe we shouldn't. I mean, basically, there was no structure left for them to really build it in. And they moved to a much better tree that I am no longer concerned about them um, having built in and their nest coming down. But after going there a couple of times to retrieve eaglets, I'm kind of over it. They were
yeah,
very
yeah.
glad they picked another tree.
Yeah, and you see that, for example, that long time nest that I did that was by the Wisconsin, they picked a nice spot with a real healthy tree and a good spot to build a nest. So I think, we've talked this quite a bit about this in the past is, there's the instincts of nesting and then there's the experience. And this will bring this pair, a lot of needed experience on what to do as well. As tragic as this is, they will move on and they will be better parents for it. They're just not as emotional as us as human beings, so they'll learn from this and they'll move on and they'll be productive. I they'll be back at it next year.
Well, I mean, last year Scout ate his babies, not
Yeah,
realizing they were his babies. He
yeah,
didn't know that they weren't prey. He made a huge leap in a year. Um,
yeah,
and they were both being excellent parents. So this is going to be a great nest to watch in the future. It's they're still in the same tree. They just have a nest down below this one that they have been on and they were eating fish at. So it looks like they are adopting that second nest to be their nest for the future. So that would be great.
yeah. And I guess, anything else with this nest? I'm trying to think if we have. I think we
No,
covered.
just rip little guys.
Yeah,
That's this was a great screen save that somebody got from
yeah,
the camera that is a sweet shot of the three. And the fact that all three were doing well and there was plenty of food, there wasn't a lot of, you know, tussles between
yeah,
siblings. They were doing a great job.
yeah. But moving from
One
uh,
catastrophe to the next.
yeah, dramatic, and this is the Trempealeau nest that we've been talking about in Wisconsin, on the Wisconsin side of the Mississippi River. And what's happened at this one, Beth? There's a lot of drama at this one.
Yeah. This is a bit of crazy going on. So number one, I said to Drew, I sent him a text with what was happening at the Trempealeau nest and said, "Did we jinx these nest cams
Yeah,
by picking them to follow? Because we are have surpassed our 50% mortality um, for these three nests. It's it's very frustrating. But anyway, Trempealeau had three young eaglets just hatched as recent as last week, beginning of last week. And Mrs. T, who's here feeding its oldest of the three, was doing a great job, but Mr. T had not been seen. He had been heard, but not necessarily coming into the nest and taking over duties from Mrs. T. And then he was spotted coming in and stealing a large fish out of the nest, which Mrs. T had brought in for her three eaglets. And great credit to the Raptor Resource Project because the camera person on it followed Mr. T from that nest with the fish and followed him. And he flew across the river to the Minnesota side of the Mississippi and went to another nest that was occupied by a female that looks like she's brooding or incubating, and brought the fish to that nest. Um, and so that was kind of a mind blown moment, because that is not something I've ever seen or heard of really before. But because he it was not fulfilling his duties at this nest, uh, Mrs. T had to fly off the nest and go get more food. And it had been raining and cold here the other morning. And I think this was it yesterday morning.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
This
And
is
yesterday morning, the two younger eaglets in the nest expired due to exposure to the cold rain and wind and temperature. And because they can't thermoregulate, they can't control their own body temperatures. They, the elements are going to uh, weaken them and take them out. And
Yeah, and
that's
you can just interject a little bit, Beth. You can kind of see with this one, we call them puff balls. Those are the real young ones. And they start losing this down and get brown and they have, they're building up feathers that they can use to stay warm. But at this point, they're very, very susceptible to anything really. And that's a real sensitive time at a nest. And
Well, if you recall back to that previous photo of the three at Bella and
yeah,
Scout's
I
nest,
can
they were
bounce
at the
back here. Yeah.
thermoregulating. Yeah. So are they fully capable at this point of
Yeah, I mean they're
thermoregulating?
fine. You can see they have a little bit of down here, but they're out of the woods as far as being having to be brooded and everything. So yeah, they're farther enough along that they'd be fine.
That'd be hard to get three of them under an eagle. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. They're getting big. But these guys, unfortunately, when they are this young,
Yeah.
very susceptible. And you need a team. We've seen that a lot. If something does happen to one of the pair, it's really difficult. And that's basically what Mrs. T is doing at this point, is kind of with I don't know, a deadbeat dad or whatever you want to call him. But
Well, he's a young eagle, and
yeah,
and we are jokingly saying a deadbeat dad. He somehow feels the reason to split himself between
yeah,
two women in two nests in two states.
yeah.
So he has spread himself thin, is what he's done, and he might be thinking he's trying to do his best to raise these eaglets at both nests, but he's failing because it's really not possible to do what he's doing, especially since the thought process is that he is a young eagle. He was either new in 2024 or he's new this year. Raptor Resource Group is looking into whether they can for sure identify him from this year to last year, because the behavior is very similar, but they're not sure he had a nest on the other side of the river last year when he was behaving similarly. Um, but it is a very curious case
Yeah.
that a male is trying to split himself between two females and two nests.
Yeah, and you don't, this is kind of a rare occurrence. And we've talked a little bit about trios. We'll talk a little bit more in the future and future pods about trio nests. It's another kind of interesting one where it completely goes against their nature. And these situations, what Mr. T's doing is not super common in the eagle world, but in other species, other birds, it is pretty common. So it's just a little
Yep.
weird to see it in bald eagles. But it does happen in the natural world. But it
Yeah, I
doesn't
know we've seen
happen very
evidence with Cooper hawks that are banded that they will have two females at two different nests
yeah,
that they're supplying food at. Um, but I think the factor that he is a young eagle just makes it harder on him to be trying to do what he appears to be trying to do.
yeah,
So if you don't follow the I keep saying the Raptor Resource Group, but the Raptor Resource Project, it might be worth your while to follow that as well, because they're the experts that know this eagle. And Drew, this was part of this is our Wisconsin nest that we had known about. They had only taken it over last year.
yeah.
So the nest had existed for several years prior to that, but it's only been observed by the Raptor Resource Project for um, this year and last.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's it's very interesting, and explore.org is where you can watch it too, or on YouTube. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. I'm curious to see what happens. I know they'll be observing across into Minnesota as well at that one, see what's going on, to figure out what's going on. It again, it's kind of like the trio nest. It's just hard to say what's going through his mind. And instinctively he's not doing what normal eagles do, so we're not sure why he's doing this, but you know, it's it, it's an interesting case, and it's going to be
And
interesting
is
to follow.
she on eggs or on chicks, and are they his? You
Yeah,
know, I that would be even odder if they weren't his, or
yeah,
maybe something happened to that male and he felt the need to step in. Um, it's sort of a conundrum, but if they are just going on eggs, that's really late.
yeah,
It's going to be a brutal summer for them
yeah.
if they've waited this long.
Yeah, and we've talked about that, just the
Yeah.
nature of the length of a bald eagle nesting season. When you get on eggs, and this nest overall was pretty late. And you get into the dog days of summer, and biting flies and the disease and everything, and the heat and humidity. It's not a good. It's a very low percentage that they'll be successful to fledge. So it'll be one we'll be watching it to see what happens, and answering your questions. Again, if you have any questions about these nests, we have some experience. We're not on the inside, so we're using kind of our best educated guess from our experience. But feel free to send us questions on that, or through the email at nestingeaglespodcast@gmail.com. We love questions, and we'll try to answer them as best we can, because they
And
are interesting situations.
we're learning from this as well. I
Yeah.
mean, Drew and I, in looking at the statistics of what of the the seven nests, Decorah ended up not having a hatch, so we dropped that off the list. The other six that we're watching, it it's there were 17 chicks at one point, or possibility of chicks, and we have seven remaining. So the statistically that is really, that's a bad year. And what this kind of shows us, even though it's just a really small sample set, is that two they lay at least two eggs. So when Drew and I are going through what our um, volunteers are giving us back at the end of the year, at the end of the season when they're fledging, if only one bird is fledged, it certainly tells me now that if the other eggs in the nest weren't viable, then we lost chicks
Yeah.
along the way, where at an early age where we can't see them.
Yeah. 'Cause-
Typically, by the time we see them, if we see three beaks, coming up and wanting to get food from the adult, three fledge or two fledge or one fledges, so it must be something that happens very early on in the nesting season.
Yeah, and that's it's either the eggs aren't viable, aren't hatching for whatever reason, and or they are hatching, and then in that sensitive area, the first couple of weeks, we're losing eaglets. So yeah, I think it's great information for us, and gives us a more, I guess, micro look into the nest that we're seeing, where we're seeing more of a broader look at it. And because of the nature of the nests, most of the nests, we're not seeing those babies and not able to count their heads until, they're 2 or 3 weeks old, where they're old enough that we can see them over the top of the nest.
And it could be that the adults just choose not to continue to incubate those
Yeah.
eggs, because they have a hatchling. So, um, there's all sorts of reasons why it could happen, but it's definitely signaling to us that, if only one fledges, there was something else in that nest that didn't make it.
But it is successful because we were seeing it in the data, not just our group, but nationally, most successful nests will fledge at an average like a 1.5. So you're seeing about one or two eagles fledge from a successful nest, and then there's the triples that you see, and that's fairly rare, but we see it a fair amount with three fledging, and that boosts up the average. But yeah, it's pretty common to see that 1 to 2 that are successfully out of the nest, and probably in most cases we're not seeing it, but there is an egg or an eaglet that didn't make it. Very long in the nest that we just because of the nature of not having a camera on it, we didn't see, but it's definitely great information for us. And let's see, I
Let's
think
go into something happy, Drew.
yeah, let's move on. Okay, okay, this is the little baby.
Oh, yes.
Hopefully this one makes it, but um,
This was just a couple hours ago.
yeah, but this is the Big Bear nest, the one with Jackie and Shadow. Everything is going well. They still have the two. Of course, that third one did make it through that horrible storm. But again, this is a successful nest with two, and I guess they've named them Sunny and Gizmo,
Yep.
and they're about 6 weeks old. So everything's going well there.
And this is a case in point where you look at that nest and you wonder, how would that third one fit in it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's
That's a tiny nest for sure. Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
Well,
but
they could spread out, so
yeah,
you know.
yeah, they can. So yeah, for sure. Because they will get bigger. If they're 6 weeks old, they still have some growing to do. But yeah, everything's going well with them, and that's great to see. And we'll be following them, and
Both of them
um,
preening this morning, a lot of
yeah.
preening going on, which is a really good sign that a bird is comfortable and it's healthy if it's preening.
Yes, yeah, that's a good tip. That's one of the best tips that she gives her volunteers about the preening, and it makes sense. You kind of they know that they're healthy and that they're have the energy to do all that. So yeah, for sure. So just to I know we've probably discussed this before, but these guys are 6 weeks, so they probably have at least another 4 weeks in the nest. Most of them, fledge around 10 to 12 weeks. So they got a little more time to go, but so far so good. So we're great to see that they're doing so well. And then we're off to
Colorado.
Colorado, my old stomping grounds, Fort St. Vrain. Unfortunately, they had the four, and then I think what are they down to? Are they down to one now? Is
No,
that
no, there's two.
there's
She's
two?
just
Okay,
blocking the other
okay,
one.
all right.
Yeah. And this is this was really hard to grasp initially. I didn't realize it was in the 80s when we lost the two eaglets in the nest, and then that made a lot of sense to me. And if you have chickens, I my chickens on a snowy day, they like us to shovel a path for them, and
Yeah.
I can't believe it, but we actually do it for them. But they like to be outside, and they like to get around and explore, and they're actually fine in snow. They're fine in rain. We had a huge thunderstorm, and they were all out in the yard, so didn't seem particularly concerned. But I notice when it is hot out, those chickens are not out in the yard. When it's really hot, they're under a shrub, they're panting, they're drinking a lot of water. And no one really thinks about how summer heat can really be detrimental to a bird. And that's what Drew was alluding to earlier too, is towards the end of the nesting season when it's really warm out and you've got an all black brown body and no shade, that sun is relentless
Yeah.
and it can really deplete the energy and just suck the moisture out of you. So summer tends to be worse than winter, I think, for most birds.
Yeah. Yeah, and from my experience, we lived in Colorado for about 5 years, and it there's so many like extremes. You'll have days where you'll get a foot of snow, and then the next day it's 80, so 70s and 80s and sunny. So it's not surprising that they had that kind of type of weather of just ebbs and flows, and unfortunately, it killed a couple of those eaglets, but it reinforce how much weather affects bald eagle nests and other nests as well. But it's definitely number one. You have some eagles preying on other nests if they're not defended, but the vast majority of failures or losing eaglets is caused by weather. It's just the nature of it.
And of the 10 eaglets we have lost, 9 out of 10 were weather related.
Yeah, yeah.
The
So
other
it's
one was the nest in Castachie, Louisiana, where the one sibling attacked the other, and it was already in a weakened condition because not enough food was being brought
yeah,
into the nest. So why there was not enough food being brought in, if it was because of young parents or because there weren't enough resources there. It looked like there would be. There was a
yeah,
lake
yeah.
right
It
there
was
behind it. But the other 9 were all weather related. Snow, cold, wet rain,
yeah,
nest
heat.
falling in a thunderstorm. It's weather related.
Yeah, yeah. So that's something that we see quite a bit. And, in a lot of cases, when we're communicating with our volunteers about, oh, my nest failed, a lot of times I can kind of date back and say, okay, we had this horrible thunderstorm, and then, the next week they come to observe. We can kind of, our best guess is that it was rather weather related. Some of them, it's just, for whatever reason, you can't, you're like, it was beautiful all week, and then all of a sudden the nest failed. So
Right.
it's not that easy, but a lot of times you can kind of figure it out that it was something weather related, a storm or whatnot that
Well, and
caused an issue.
then like you say too, Drew, it's the eagles keep coming back. They keep trying to incubate or brood, and you're like, well, wait a minute, maybe it, they're still okay, and it confuses the volunteers as well because the instinct to continue to take care of the young in the nest is so strong in the eagle. It continues to try to recover the nest when there's no recovery possible. So it's usually hard to decisively know that a nest has failed
Yeah.
um, when you're watching them still hanging out around the nest.
Yeah. So we use, it's clear as day when you have a nest cam on it.
Yeah,
I always,
it's clear as mud to us too.
yeah, yeah. So we have to, and a lot of times I'll have the volunteers go out there, the nest watchers, at least another time, if not a couple times, just to observe it and confirm, okay, yeah, we have a failure. Because in some cases it's confusing for the adults too, especially the younger ones that are like, what's going on? And we saw that a lot in 2022 with the avian influenza. There was a lot of confused adult eagles figuring out
Yeah,
what just happened. I've been feeding my little guy's duck, and unfortunately, it
wrong
had
choice.
had had
It's
that
carrying
problem and
the
killed them. Yeah,
disease, yeah, the virus, and yeah,
yeah,
yeah, that was very disheartening. But it's interesting how hard they still tried to brood and care for the young.
yeah.
So
And on a good note, so far so good. We haven't seen any of those occurrences, though migration's still going on. So we might
yeah,
see it. Fingers crossed we don't, but so far so good with our Wisconsin season, as
yeah.
far as not seeing huge amounts of nests just suddenly fail. So that's a good sign.
It was at this time of year, but yeah,
Yeah,
no sign of it at any of our nests. And I told you, Drew, I was really concerned about my tried and true nest because I
yeah,
thought something had really bad had happened to it because I went to observe it and there were no eagles present. And
yeah,
I was straining to try to see if the eagle could be flattened down in the nest. And it was well over 30 minutes that I
yeah,
observed nothing
yeah,
happening. And then both of them flew in. And it was like 39, 40 degrees
yeah,
that day. And I have since sat there for hours until I saw a head.
yeah.
So the eaglet, there is at least one eaglet in that nest, but what caused them to do that? Maybe it was the first hatchling was starting and she flew off the nest to go find him.
Yeah,
But, those moments when you're like, well, it's been at least a half an hour because they weren't here when I arrived. So how long were they gone? And
yeah.
what's happened to the viability of those eggs?
Yeah, and that's we have to you have to be a little patient to sometimes and even with the nest cams, sometimes you're like, oh no, and you just have to be a little more patient. They most of the time they know what they're doing, so
Well, there
it
is
should
the
be
fact that
okay.
you have to trust them to do it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And then
That's Bodie
Bodie, yeah, who has fledged
from
from the
Florida.
Northeast Florida nest cam nest. Of course, this is the one where we had Juvie come in and get kind of adopted, and they're now buddies. But I would imagine Juvie's around there somewhere too.
Yeah.
But Bodie's doing really well. I think I mentioned.
Self-feeding.
Yeah, so I mentioned this before. A lot of times, as you can see, that there's a fish in that nest. A lot of times, the adults bring um, prey items back to the nest. Still, it's kind of center. It's still their center, even after fledging. So they'll use that nest as kind of their I don't know their kitchen table, I guess. So they'll bring back food to the nest for Bodie and Juvie for a little bit for a little bit more while, and eventually they'll go off on their own, and most likely together. So there has been some research on that. A lot of them stick together at least for a little while, and then they'll venture off and learn how to be eagles as best they can. Uh, But yeah, it's good to see. Good, very positive end to that season. We didn't know what was going to happen if, when Juvie came in, if Bodie was going to not make it, but luckily they both were good. And
It was
then
a great adoption.
yeah, and then that first egg, which didn't hatch, it was non-viable in that one as well. So,
Yeah.
um, but interesting nonetheless. So that was positive, not all negative, I guess, Beth. We don't.
No,
um,
we've had two fledges, and
yeah,
so
yeah,
that's the point in which we stop keeping records.
yeah,
Once they've fledged, then um, that is considered a success, and what happens from there on out, we still go by and we'll check on them periodically to make sure that they're still thriving. But then shortly thereafter, it's going to be a bit rare to see them.
yeah.
And
So I do recommend if you do watch this EOCam, check it out. Maybe check out the highlights. I don't know if you need to. They're probably in and out quite a
yeah,
bit, and the adults are dropping off food, and but you'll see them a little bit. So that's always fun to
Bodie's been
watch them.
roosting instead
Yeah,
of laying in the nest,
yeah,
so it's like, oh, they're
yeah.
they're an eagle now. They're
All
roosting.
grown up. Yeah,
Yeah, and we stop referring to them as eaglets, and they're juvenile
yeah,
eagles at that point when they
yeah.
fledge.
And just to make a point kind of about the coloration, we were talking about how, it looks like it was windy, but he's got quite a bit of white on him underneath. And then there you see stuff online about the different aging, but they're all a little bit different. And, these first year, they'll have that really black beak and mostly brown feathers with a little bit speckling. He seems to have a little more white than most
I
of
think
them
it's just
do.
showing his down,
Yeah, it could be.
getting wind
Yeah,
blown.
but it does vary. So he'll kind of morph as he goes along, and then eventually, if everything goes well and he makes it to his fourth or fifth year, he'll have that adult plumage. So,
And
um,
gradually his
yeah,
beak is going to start to turn the yellow,
yeah,
and his eyes will turn that golden yellow color as well, along with his head turning white and his tail turning white.
yeah. So it's a fun process. It took me a while. And I get that question a lot. How old is this eagle? And it takes a while, and they do, as I said, they vary a little bit, but most of the time I'm pretty good at telling, oh yeah, that's a 2 year, or that's a 3 year, or whatever. So, but it's a fun little game, I guess, to identify them. So
How old is this eagle?
yeah. And then this is your beauty. This is one of
Yeah,
Beth's nests, and
I was very happy to see an eaglet, and this one is not from a half a mile away, so
yeah,
he's a little bit. It was very windy, the nest was rocking, but
yeah,
this was a discernible photo of a little guy peeking up to see what's making that awful noise, and I told it, yes, I need to get a muffler replacement. Thank you very much.
yeah. And then you can see, just to look at the eye, this is of the adult, you can see that it's got that yellow. So it's not that where Bodie is
Yeah,
completely brown, dark,
yeah.
and then the adults, it's that more yellow with the pupa. You can see it.
I love that orangey yellow beak.
Yeah, yeah. She's a beautiful bird. Yeah,
He is.
yeah, and got a cute little eaglet. So hopefully
I think
everything
there's a
goes well with
second one
them.
in there because I
There
could
is,
see
yeah,
a body, but I wasn't seeing um it wasn't this bird's body, this little
yeah,
eagle's body. So I'm pretty sure there's a second one in there.
yeah. Cool, very cool, very cool. And think that's it. Again, subscribe, like, send us comments. We're always here to answer questions. I know there's probably a lot of questions, and we can
You know
help
what?
with that
One
process.
one thing I do want to say, because you and I were talking about it, and I think this is, and I think this, if we have people listening to us, this might help people out a little bit, because there are thoughts that, like that at the Trempealeau nest that third eaglet should have been taken away from Mrs. T and raised elsewhere, and the Drew and I are both on the same page. These eagles need to make their own mistakes. Um, you know, with um with the eagle that ate its young, it came back the next year. It's a really strong father. Mr. T is doing some things that are really unique that we don't see a lot of. He's got to make those mistakes
Yeah,
and learn from them. And if that means the Trempealeau nest is lost as well as the Minnesota nest is lost, that would be really unfortunate. But that's the way eagles learn. They're not like us where, they have laws and and
yeah,
you're going to jail if something happens to your child as a human. These guys, it's learning by trial and error. And so us as humans have got to stop putting our, what do I want to say? Our sense of raising children
yeah,
on eagles, because it is not the same.
yeah.
And the best thing for that eagle is to fumble through, make the errors, and it'll come out stronger at the other end. It will have knowledge that it did not previously have, and hopefully then act on that knowledge.
Yeah, like a good example, I'll throw one story that I've seen before, is like nest defense. It's a real important skill that the pair learns, depending on where the nest is, because there's some where they have a lot of other eagles around the area, especially some of these territories like on the Mississippi where there's
Yeah.
a lot of eagles. And they have to be very good at defending their nest, defending their eggs and eaglets. And in a lot of those cases, those younger eagles, they probably lost eaglets to being preyed on by, subadults or what other eagles, um, or great horned owls or whatever it was. They've got to learn that process. And in a lot of cases, I've seen younger eagles that, for whatever reason, maybe I didn't see them being preyed upon, but the nest failed. And then they come back stronger in future years because they know, okay, I have to defend the nest. I have to defend my eaglets because in the past, I lost eaglets to subadults or whatever preyed on those nests. And um, they do learn that process. And as Beth mentioned, trial and error. They don't have, um, classes or whatever they have to learn. And the instincts only take them so far in the process. They know to incubate, they know to feed, they know to
Yep.
brood, all that, but they got to learn the ins and outs and how to dynamic. And um, I mentioned this before, but the older pairs, and I know Beth, you have a couple of yours, your are older pairs, and they're just, it's like a dance. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
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 Just
As one flies off
yeah,
the nest, the other one is flying in to take immediate
yeah.
coverage of the nest.
And
And
if they have a situation at the nest where they need, someone else comes in or whatever, they know the female's on the nest. She's protecting them. She's calling in the male to chase them out. It's like it's really cool to watch a really veteran pair do their thing.
it's I think they're well choreographed.
Yeah, for sure.
They
Yeah,
just
it's
they understand each other really well. They understand what needs to be done. There's some chatter between them, but it is like a beautiful dance. It's well
yeah.
choreographed and they're very efficient in their movements and how they tend their nest.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a fun process to watch those eagles
And
and
then Drew and I both get a nest where we're like, oh,
yeah,
what were they doing? And a nest fails because of
yeah,
bad choices that the eagles make, but they aren't human. They're eagles. They have to they they go through trial and error. Some of them pick up very quickly. I mean, Scout learned very quickly not to eat his eaglets. That those
yeah,
were his to raise, not to eat. And it we kind of say it flippantly, a little bit jokingly, but he was doing great
yeah.
until that nest came down a couple
And they
days ago.
may learn, with this process with losing a nest. And I think you see this as well with, for example, your one, Beth, where they were building nonstop in a tree that obviously couldn't support their nest, and they finally picked a spot. So they need to go through that process too. And I think they will be better for it. I would imagine they'll pick that nest that's below the main
Yeah,
nest. Maybe, but they might pick a completely different tree. You just don't know.
yeah.
But they'll go through that process of learning, and it's all about I know a lot of people I've talked to in the past, and it's about the adults are the important ones as far as moving on and learning and being as productive as possible. And sometimes there's some hiccups and bumps in the road, but they'll get there. Most of them do. So
Yeah.
yeah,
All right. So I think we rambled a little long. So
yeah,
some of our word of the day and all that stuff we're going to skip
yeah.
for
We'll
a
skip it this
second.
week. There was a lot of action, but
It was,
yeah.
and let's hope there's not that kind of action anymore.
Yeah, it'd
It's
be
been
good.
enough.
It'd be good. I think it'd be good for the people that are watching these nest cams too, and
Yeah,
us.
I feel
You
like
you invest time and
the
then,
Grim Reaper coming
yeah,
into these eagle nests.
yeah. But yeah, hoping for a smooth rest of the season for the ones that survived, and we'll be checking in on them, discussing, using our expertise to kind of help you learn the whole process and what we think is happening. And as I said, if you like what we're doing, subscribe, send us email, send us questions, comments, like us on Facebook, and you can always email us at
Love to
nestingeaglespodcast@gmail.com.
hear from you.
And with that, I think we'll sign off. So thank you
Yeah.
all.